There's a significant misunderstanding of how narratives are written in the sports world now. Everybody thinks, you know what? Social media, it democratizes coverage. Instead of the old days when guys would be smoking cigars in the back of the train writing about Babe Ruth, everybody gets a voice. And you can define, the athlete can just get out there and define their own story. It's not true. It is not true. Narratives are made up from a few tastemakers and everybody else follows. We saw it with JaVale McGee and Shaq. JaVale McGee finally had to say, hey, you know what? I'm not just a goofball. I'm a great energy guy. I'm a champion. Stop making fun of me because one guy is taking my narrative and spinning it crazy. And it worked. And there is nobody out there defending Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers is not Nicki Minaj. He doesn't have an army of online people rising up to defend him at any little misstep. So I'm going to do it for him. Doc Rivers won 101 playoff games. Doc Rivers was the coach of the year. Doc Rivers went to the playoffs out of 23 times that he's been a coach, has missed the playoffs 5 times. He's won a champion, and he tried, alongside Paul Pierce, to make dumping Gatorade on people indoors a thing. It didn't take off, but it should have. And I understand now that he's on the verge of the series that's 3-2 and it might go sideways. But he has a responsibility to say, stop the presses. I'm not the guy for kids, for people out there who can't coach their 8-foot rim kids basketball team to take shots at me. I know what I'm doing, so miss me with it. And I understand that all coaches should try to be Belichickian and say, I'm 100% focused on the Raptors. But Belichick is minted and nobody can say anything to knock him off his goat perch. For a guy that's on the kind of the fringe, Doc Rivers has to defend himself because nobody else out there is doing it. So I'm 100% okay with him pushing back against the narrative that he's just this choke artist and is leading Philly down the wrong road.
All right, before I go, Wilds, who you said kind of like with Shaq was the one guy pushing the JaVale McGee narrative. Do you have a guy?
So.
Is there 1 or 2 guys pushing the Doc narrative that he's not a good coach? Who is that? Who's pushing that?
No,
narrative?
I think it's an army of couch coaches out there who spend some time on Basketball Reference and then just load up their ammo and bop, 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 Doc Rivers stinks.
All right, here's the thing, Wilds. There's no media narrative about Doc. No one's out to get Doc. The media loves Doc. In fact, most media are very protective of Doc because Doc is so great with the media. The guys that are pushing this narrative are fans who don't know Doc. And they don't have an agenda because they're not friendly with Doc. Doc doesn't give them quotes or calls or whatever like that. They just go out there and call it like they see it. And I like Doc too, but I'm calling it like I see it. These are just the facts. Now, I have no problem with Doc trying to defend himself. The way he did it, I mean, I don't know that you had to say you would look at that in Orlando and say that was a hell of a coaching job. It was a good coaching job. I could have done without that phrase and to say that, tooting your own horn, but that was a good coaching job until they blew the last 3. But Doc doesn't get killed, Nick, for that series. Nobody kills Doc for losing that series to Detroit. If anybody, they killed Tracy McGrady. Because T-Mac said, if you remember famously, after they went up 3-1, it's good to get to the second round. Right?
Yeah.
So T-Mac gets that.
Wasn't great.
But Doc played fast and loose with history yesterday. CP3, he was on one leg. I covered that series for ESPN. I was there. CP3 missed the first 2 games against Houston, and they split. So it was 1-1 when Chris Paul came back, and Chris Paul was magnificent. He averaged 21 and 10 during that series. They went up 3-1 and then blew the last 3 games. All right. And then to kind of try to fudge the blown lead with the late Clippers when they were up 3-1 and blame it on the bubble. Come on. No, it wasn't a bubble. Doc's record is what Doc's record is. And Nick, when they hired him in Philadelphia 2 years ago, I thought it was odd. I was like, wait a minute. Doc, he has 7 years of, let's call it like it was, underachievement with the Clippers. Mm-hmm. Great roster, championship caliber roster. CP3 is your point guard and never got past the second round. Yes, some years they had some injuries in the playoffs. Give you that. Yep. But other years they flat out blew it. And then they hired him. And the thing people pointed to, Nick, the blown leads, for them to actually be on the cusp of blowing not a 3-1 lead, but a 3-0 lead is incredible.
It's impossible.
When that was the very thing everybody was talking about.
Correct. So, Wilds, listen, I appreciate your defense here, Wilds. And you throw Wilds on camera with me because I'm going to try to convince him here. Because here's the deal. There are a lot of narratives that don't take hold. When narratives do take hold, it tends to be when the narrative aligns with things we can observe, see, or facts. So I like JaVale McGee, and I did feel badly for him. But the reason JaVale McGee's narrative that Shaq was pushing took hold was because he kept doing the goofiest things imaginable. If JaVale McGee stopped doing goofy things on the court, Shaq'd in a fool wouldn't have worked. And so you're saying this narrative for Doc. So here's the facts. The most blown 3-1 leads in NBA history, Doc Rivers. The most blown 3-2 leads in NBA history, Doc Rivers. The most losses in a closeout game in NBA history with 31, Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers has coached for 23 years. He has coached Chris Paul, Tracy McGrady, Kevin Garnett, Kawhi Leonard, and now Joel Embiid. He has coached 0 conference finals games without Kevin Garnett. And in fact, the year in Boston, when Garnett was hurt, they didn't make the conference finals that year either. So it's not unfair. It is the reality. Having T-Mac, having CP3, having Kawhi, having Embiid, and never getting to round 3 is a problem, would be a problem for anyone. Which is why, Wilds, I would argue that the pressure tonight on Philly is nearly unprecedented for round 1. If this gets to a game 7, when only 3 teams down 3-0 have ever gotten to a game 7 and none of them have won it, I think the pressure of the game 7 will be too much for all parties involved. I feel like this is a must-win game for both teams, Toronto and Philadelphia. Because if Philly wins, they move on. If Toronto wins, I think they're moving on. So I think Philly has to go into Air Canada Center, or whatever it's called now, and win tonight, or else it is a historic collapse.
I tend to agree with you. The fact that Doc is sort of broaching this shows that he does feel a little bit of pressure. But, Doc, I'm trying to ride for you, bud. You can take the pressure off. I remember that Celtics championship. Dump Gatorade on you. Let's go. You're a championship coach. Not focused on the past. I'm focused on the future. That's why you fire back at the media.
Top 15 coach of all time.
Well, that's
he was
the
on
thing,
the list.
The narrative. Wild, you're talking about, you're acting like everybody's piling on Doc. He was just named this year one of the 15 greatest coaches ever.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from First Things First, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.